MGX Minerals is revolutionizing the new energy economy with patented lithium extraction technology, replacing traditional solar evaporation using low-cost, low-energy nanofiltration. The first system of this paradigm shift technology is currently being commissioned. MGX Minerals trades on the CSE, symbol XMG, the OTCQB, symbol MGXMF, and Frankfurt, symbol 1MG. For more information, visit our website, mgxminerals.com.
Welcome to White Rock Podcast. Comments made on White Rock Podcast and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Sheryl McCumsey. She's the founder of Pesticide Free Alberta, online at pesticidefreealberta.org. She's speaking to us from Edmonton. Sheryl, welcome to the White Rock Podcast.
Hello.
Sheryl, have you ever heard of a municipality that draws its drinking water from an aquifer that's below an area of intense agricultural activity, not testing their drinking water for pesticides?
Well, I couldn't give you a list, but I've heard that maybe White Rock is one of those places. I do know that in Canada, there is not a mandatory requirement to test for contaminants in our water, which is rather shocking. The CBC did a segment on that a while ago, and so when I looked at that, I started looking at where pesticides were tested. And so people should be asking these questions all the time of their municipality. And so if White Rock is not testing for pesticides and it's under an agricultural area, that just seems bizarre. I know that places where this is a concern, sometimes there is no testing that goes on, and of course people are going to be at risk.
Well, we saw Walkerton, Ontario, where they either fabricated or didn't bother to do tests and people died.
Well, yes, there's all kinds of water contamination, and it's really sad to see that people react after harm is done, or sometimes they're not even linking harm to what's in the water. I know in both Toronto and Montreal have found the herbicide atrazine in their drinking water. And atrazine is still yet to be banned in Canada, where it's banned in other countries. And also our levels for exposure that are considered acceptable are higher than what the EU accepts. And I have to ask how they even come up with these numbers. But to see that these pesticides are in the water, and this is one herbicide in particular that could be going on in your area as well. It's a herbicide. It's linked to birth defects, and it's in studies shows really serious deformities in frogs and so on. So it's really quite disturbing to think that you could have one or two or more herbicides or other contaminants in your water and not even know.
Do you think there should be federal legislation mandating that all drinking water be tested for contamination?
Oh, absolutely we should. We should have, and I don't understand why some of our so-called guidelines don't even meet what the World Health Organization recommends. I mean, we think we have clean water. You can look at water, it can look perfectly fine, but if it has a chemical contaminant in there, you may not be able to smell or taste this. And it could be seriously harmful. Dioxins, for example, could be in chemicals that are used on our lawns. 2,4-D is one of the herbicides in lawn chemical and can be contaminated with dioxins, and that if you cook this up quickly in a laboratory, dioxins can be present. They're not looked for in all of the products, and dioxins are considered one of the most toxic substances on the planet.
Why do you think White Rock refuses to test its water for pesticides?
Well, that's really strange, especially if people are concerned about it. I would wonder what kind of argument they could come up with, especially if you're living in the community. So if the people that are being asked this question live in the community, I'd be asking them, aren't you concerned about your water? Why don't you want to know what's in your water? if they don't live in the community, well, then I guess it's easy to ignore that concern. I really wonder how they could not. I would, as a person living in your community, I would probably take a sample and test it, and if I found pesticides, I'd be like saying to them, are they willing to risk legal action at some point, because they are responsible for the safety of their community.
Does the refusal to test for pesticides in White Rock drinking water sound safe?
Absolutely not. The water's underneath an area where pesticides are used. You could definitely expect there to be contamination there. I would also want to know who is testing, when they're testing, and what they're testing for. Because, for example, here in Edmonton, people are told that we test pesticides. I don't know if they've changed their protocol in the last few years, but I found out that one of the times that they test pesticides, and they do this 4 times a year, is in January. Well, January, you're not going to find pesticides in the water. You wouldn't expect that. You're going to expect it after a heavy rainfall or, you know, in the summer months. So it's really important to know exactly and have that transparency. I don't understand why any municipality can't have the testing results right on their website to show you what they're doing.
What might be the possible health impacts if there are pesticides present?
Oh, there's a ton of health impacts, tons of studies on all different kinds of pesticides linking to multiple impacts. Cancer, of course, is one that's on a lot of people's minds these days since the recent lawsuit that occurred in the U.S. with a groundskeeper developing non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Cancer is just one of them, though. I mean, if this is in the air, this is going to impact any kind of lung disease, like asthma, for example. It'll exacerbate those diseases. It's linked to birth defects, infertility. Parkinson's is really another strong one that in France they have now compensated those who are exposed to pesticides who develop Parkinson's. They believe the connection is so strong. So with the growing body of science out there, and the list gets longer, there's many health impacts from pesticides. These are poisons. These are poisons designed to kill something. And so we should consider that's what they're used for.
In your opinion, is there anything such as a safe level of pesticides?
Well, just like with anything, there is certainly some toxins that have what we call higher toxicity than others. I mean, like, we hear about lead and asbestos. We hear about other things like thalidomide historically, and Agent Orange, of course, which was actually sprayed in Canada, just banned in 1985, actually. But, so all of these pesticides have a variety of levels of toxicity, but at the same time, there is a problem with how they're assessed in the first place, and that only the active ingredient in a product is assessed, not the product itself. And the product has additives which can enhance or increase toxicity. And then we have the synergistic impacts of other things that could be present. So I know that you're concerned about a couple of heavy metals in your water, and there are studies that show that there is a synergistic impact of heavy metal being there with a pesticide. So that's definitely a concern. I would be, it's hard to say what is safe when we're not really looking at even how people are being exposed in multiple ways. Like you're exposed in your water, perhaps. You're exposed maybe in your food or in your neighborhood. So what is the limit before you develop a disease? If we do not assess endocrine disruption, which we don't do, it hasn't been done up until this point. And when you mess with the endocrine system, you are potentially creating conditions for cancer or fertility issues, developmental issues, and so on. This is practically every organ in the body can be impacted. So to say there's a safe level, How do we determine that? That's my question. And so I personally would not like to see any pesticides at all in my water. And if I'm seeing any, I would like to know how that's determined, that it's safe.
We'll have more with Sheryl McCumsey right after the break.
I'm Greg Johnston, CEO of Carl Data Solutions, an industrial Internet of Things company that provides big data solutions for monitoring critical infrastructure. Carl Data offers machine learning and predictive analytics features through our cloud-based applications to deliver key asset-saving operational insights from massive amounts of data. Carl Data trades on the CSE, symbol CRL, and the pink symbol CDTAF. For more details on Carl Data, please visit carlsolutions.com.
Avon Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia, Saskatchewan, and the Yukon. Trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the pink symbol ABN-AF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, Avon's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at avonresources.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Sheryl McCumsey. Sheryl, getting back to what they have already found in White Rock water, arsenic, manganese, other heavy metal contaminants, how do they react with other things like pesticides, or have there been any studies into that?
Well, I've looked at a few studies online, and there is some science on that shows there is a synergistic impact. So one of the impacts could be something like oxidative stress, which is kind of what predisposes us to DNA damage, for example, which would potentially develop a type of cancer. And so definitely there is a relationship between multiple exposures to different toxins. So when you talk about a low level of this and a low level of that, and then you mix that up, it's just like a drug interaction. If you get a prescription, your pharmacist is always going to ask you what else you're taking, and some drugs are, like, for instance, there's some drugs on the market that if you eat a grapefruit, you're going to have a problem. So people are warned about this when they're taking a drug. How come there's no concern about this with pesticides? It seems like we're completely myopic about this. It doesn't make sense.
Why do you think White Rock does not test their drinking water for pesticides the way Metro Vancouver does?
Maybe that's because you might find it, more likely to find it, or not knowing exactly what Vancouver tests and how often they test. I can't say how much better that water is, but if you're aware of how much better it is, and there is an improvement on the testing, yeah, you have to wonder what the reluctance is. There certainly is a cost associated with testing for pesticides, but for a municipality, I don't think that like I've actually had testing done on myself as a citizen here in Edmonton. So I have to wonder why they want to risk not looking, especially if you're living there.
Do you think, besides just testing water, that perhaps municipalities should do some random blood tests on their citizens to see if they are being exposed to harmful chemicals?
Yeah, it's hard to say how useful that will be, because and it's very hard to get a lab to do that in Canada. I've been kind of trying to find a lab that'll do that kind of testing. The timeliness of this and what else you're being exposed to. So it is a little difficult to draw a parallel from what the exposure is for people, but of course you can certainly look at your water itself. I would be concerned as a citizen living there, not just about the water, but also about the air, because we have exposure through different ways of, through not just ingesting something, but through the skin, which is a one way of absorbing a pesticide. And they, even on agricultural websites, they state that the head area will absorb a pesticide faster than if you ingest it. and then also just breathing it in. So, I mean, the problem would be if you do that people could make claims that you're getting exposure from another way, which is totally possible, and it might be a concern in your community. You might want to test the air. But I would probably just focus on the water itself if that's your primary concern, and actually test the water and do it multiple times when you might expect a contaminant to show up.
There's radon in White Rock water. Does that mean when you have a shower and it becomes a gas through the steam that you have a risk of lung cancer?
Well, I'm not familiar with that particular issue. I know it's a big concern, and that, a person could buy bottled water, but when you're showering, contaminants you're gonna be exposed to them through your shower. So how are you gonna avoid what's in your water when you're taking a shower? The other concern is that every time you eat out or go to a coffee shop in town, or visit someone, you're again going to be exposed to this contaminant in your water system. So just buying bottled water is not going to solve the problem. It really has to be solved at the municipal level. And I can't really say much about other contaminants because I'm not familiar with them, but I certainly would be concerned about having that in my house if that was the case, and I'd want to be investigating.
We'll have more with Sheryl McCumsey right after this.
Arctic Star Exploration, operated by a team of proven mine finders, is focused on diamonds in Finland and the Northwest Territories of Canada. Work programs are underway in Finland and planned for Canada this summer. Arctic Star trades on the TSX Venture Exchange symbol ADD, on Frankfurt symbol 82A1, and the OTCQB symbol ASDZF. Please visit our website arcticstar.ca or call us at 604-689-1799.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Sheryl McCumsey. Sheryl, how do you think the people in White Rock should feel about the fact their drinking water is not tested for pesticides?
I'd be putting a lot of pressure to get change. I would, because even if I'm buying bottled water myself, I'm concerned about my community and the general health of that community. That really impacts everyone. So I would be pressuring pretty hard to get that addressed.
Knowing what you know, would you ever trust White Rock drinking water?
Not right now. I don't think I would. I think I'd want to I might even avoid going there, which is kind of sad, it's a nice place, but that's another thing. If people are just concerned about business, and if you have tourism there, people are not going to really want to drink your water, and they're going to be concerned about that. They're not going to just want to go there.
A high percentage of White Rock residents are currently buying bottled Metro Vancouver water from the stores in adjacent Surrey. They're refilling jugs at water stations. Is that something you would recommend?
Well, I can understand why people are doing that, but like I said, that's not going to really solve the problem because, maybe are you cooking with this? Are you showering with this water? Are you going out for coffee with people in town? Are you eating at restaurants? Are you visiting other people? Are you living a very sheltered life now? So, it's not really going to be probably enough to impact your health alone if you're still doing all these other things. So the problem is still not being solved. And, I personally care about my neighbor and my friends enough to know that I'd want to do more than just temporarily be buying, water at a water station. So, I wouldn't recommend that because of that reason. And I also have, sort of feel that bottled water has other impacts in the environment that are concerning. I mean, in this case, I guess probably it's not such a big deal, but, in, bottled water in general, they found really high levels of plastic in that water. So, there's going to be leaching of plastic into the water. It's probably not a very good thing either. I think it's not a very good long-term solution.
How do you feel about a city that refused to test its drinking water for possible pesticide contamination? Don't you think city councilors would like to let their citizens know if there was any danger?
Absolutely, yes. I mean, for sure. It's actually responsibility of city councilors to protect their citizens. So absolutely.
When it comes to drinking water and pesticides, have you ever heard of anything as crazy as what is happening or not happening in White Rock?
Well, in some ways, yes, I've heard of things like this. I mean, happening in different places in Canada and certainly in the U.S. We hear about Flint and how they've had issues around water for a long time. I think in Canada, people have just assumed that when the water looks good and we have lots of water, that the water is clean. But once you start looking at this, you start to see that there are other places in Canada where there's serious water contamination. And I've had people tell me that in Alberta here that they had found out that their wells were contaminated and they were not informed. They found out on their own after some people got very sick. So yes, it's a issue. It's a Canadian issue. It's not, for you guys, it's definitely a local issue, but it is a Canadian issue, and that really, Health Canada is not really doing very well when it comes to water, in my opinion, and that they have not, given reasons for why our guidelines do not meet what the World Health Organization recommends, for example, or what the EU recommends, or how they determine, or how they're making sure that the public is safe. So really all Canadians should be concerned about this. And I have heard things like this before.
There's an upcoming civic election in White Rock. What questions should people be asking the candidates?
Well, I think, of course, that your concern is about water, but in general, if you want a candidate that's going to be addressing this and other issues, you want to look at that candidate fully as being a person that actually really cares about the general public. Some places now are making even a mandatory thing to reveal where you're getting your contributions from, where your contributions are coming from when you're running, because there could be a conflict of interest there. That's not enough on its own, but it certainly is one of the things that I should want to look at when I'm electing someone. But in general, if a person is considerate and caring about the public, they would probably be open to these concerns and address them properly. I'd like to also know that candidate is a person who could take a stance in an issue, even if it's not necessarily popular with other councillors, and that they're also able to work with others, and that they may be, able to convince other councillors that this should be addressed. So these are kind of more people skills, I guess you could say, and just generally the integrity of the person. If you don't have really good integrity, maybe this is your one issue that you'll deal with, and there'll be other issues down the road that are just going to be overlooked. So I would say that, you could ask the question specifically about water, but I think you also want to assess the person that you're electing as an individual.
Should the candidates rely on Health Canada for answers?
I'd say no. I'd say at this point, there's definitely holes in the system. Even in the pharmaceutical industry, there's holes that have to do with proper assessments. First of all, we have industry providing the science used to register products. That's a conflict of interest that has historically been an issue, and it's clearly an issue that's come up in the courts in this big case down south where, this groundskeeper won his lawsuit, and there's now 8,000 plaintiffs about to sue Monsanto for their exposure to this herbicide. And it was revealed in that court case that Monsanto has been hiding evidence that this is linked to cancer. So, this is going on in the U.S., but we have the same issue here in that this herbicide is registered for use here. And it's going to be the same issue in that we're still relying on industry to provide the science to register products. So we have a conflict of interest. We have products that are not assessed, only active ingredients. We do not look at synergistic impacts of chemicals interacting with one another. And we don't seem to have oversight or regulation of pesticides, and that nobody's really concerned about how much is going out there. So, I'm looking at the pesticide sales reports for several provinces, and I see a huge increase. In Canada in general, we've had a 70% increase of pesticides over an 8-year period. And so where's the limit here? Where do we say enough is enough? I don't see any inclination on the part of Health Canada to kind of look at that. And then we have endocrine disruptors, like I mentioned. That's a huge issue. We have literally 1/4 of the Canadian public has issues with obesity, and this is not to shame anyone for having extra weight. Endocrine disruption definitely will impact a person's issues with weight gain. And we don't even look at that. So how many endocrine disruptors are out there in the environment that are probably affecting people who are having difficulty losing weight? So I really think Health Canada is doing a very poor job at this point, and Canadians need to know that we can't really rely on them for giving us the green light on using anything, in my opinion. It has to come from the general public, and that's why several provinces are making regulations above and beyond what Health Canada says we should be doing.
Following the $289 million judgment against Monsanto, should candidates be concerned with potential liability around the use of pesticides?
Oh, I think so. I mean, I think that when people are implying that something is safe instead of an acceptable risk, first of all, I mean that kind of language is incorrect in the first place. Nothing is safe. It has what we call an acceptable risk. Okay, so what is an acceptable risk? So if there is no concern to protect the public, and we have a lack of what we call informed consent. The public is, first of all, not informed about contaminants in their water. And how do they give consent about something that they're not informed about? So first, this is sort of a legal term, informed consent. Where is the informed consent? When you take a drug, you know you're taking a drug. When you're being exposed to a pesticide, exactly how are you supposed to know you're being exposed to this in the water or the air?
How can people find out more about Pesticide-Free Alberta?
Well, I have to say our webpage is sadly outdated. We have a couple of, we have a Facebook page that is more up to date, and there is a plan to create a Canadian group, and I'm working on getting somebody to work on a website that will be more up to date. But at this point, Facebook is probably one of the best places to get information. But you can contact us through our webpage if you have questions about any information that I share and would like to know more.
Sheryl, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you.
My guest has been Sheryl McCumsey, founder of Pesticide Free Alberta. Her website, pesticidefreealberta.org. If you have any questions for Sheryl or any of our other guests, you can send them to info@howstreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Thanks for listening.
Comments made on White Rock Podcast and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Archived online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. White Rock Podcast is a production of Howe Street Media Incorporated.